There was a woman in Aleppo who had exactly 4 hours left before the building she was hiding in collapsed under artillery fire. And in those 4 hours, with dust falling from the ceiling like snow and her 3 children pressed against her chest, she did not scream, she did not run, she raised her hands and she prayed. What happened in the next 60 minutes has been documented, discussed, and dissected by scholars and survivors alike. And by the end of this video, you will understand why prayer is not a symbolic gesture, not a ritual performed out of habit, but a force so powerful that it has changed the outcome of battles, healed the incurable, and rewritten the endings of stories that seemed already finished. If you are watching this from anywhere on this earth, type your country in the comments right now before you keep watching. And if you believe in the power of what you are about to hear, subscribe to this channel, because we are building a community of people who refuse to underestimate the power of raising their hands to Allah. Glorified and exalted is He. Let us go back further than Aleppo, back to the earliest chapters of human history, because the story of prayer's power did not begin recently. It began the moment mankind was created. When Prophet Adam, peace be upon him, was expelled from paradise, he did not despair, he did not curse his fate, he turned to Allah and he prayed, and the Qur'an itself records his words, a supplication of humility and hope that Allah accepted, forgiving him and guiding him. That single act, that turning of the heart toward the Creator in the darkest moment of loss, became the blueprint for every believer who came after him. Prophet Nuh, peace be upon him, spent nearly 1,000 years calling his people to righteousness, and when they refused, when they mocked him and rejected him generation after generation, he did not resort to violence. He prayed, and Allah answered with a flood that reshaped the world and preserved the believers upon the ark. Prophet Ibrahim, peace be upon him, stood in the fire that Nimrod's people built for him, flames roaring around his body, and in that moment, with death seconds away, he did not beg the fire to spare him. He simply said that Allah was sufficient for him, and he was the best disposer of affairs. And Allah commanded the fire to become cool and safe, and Ibrahim walked out without a single burn. This is not folklore. This is recorded in the Qur'an, in Surah Al-Anbiya, and it stands as one of the clearest proofs in Islamic tradition that prayer, when combined with complete trust in Allah, can override the very laws of nature. Now, travel with me to the city of Medina, more than 1400 years ago, to the year of the Battle of Badr, when the Muslims, numbering only about 313, poorly armed and exhausted, stood against a Meccan army of nearly 1,000 well-equipped fighters. The odds, by every worldly measure, were impossible. Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, understood this better than anyone, and on the night before the battle, he did something that history would never forget. He entered his tent alone, raised his hands toward the heavens, and began to plead with Allah with such intensity that his companion Abu Bakr, may Allah be pleased with him, became worried and told him that his pleading was enough, that Allah would surely fulfill his promise. The Prophet, peace be upon him, continued praying until his cloak slipped from his shoulders, and the following morning, Allah sent down angels to fight alongside the believers, as mentioned clearly in Surah Al-Anfal, and the Muslims achieved a victory so decisive that it changed the trajectory of Islamic history forever. This was not a coincidence. This was the tremendous power of prayer, demonstrated on a battlefield where logic said defeat was certain. But prayer's power is not reserved only for prophets and companions of the past. It is alive today, in ordinary people, in ordinary cities, facing ordinary struggles that feel anything but ordinary to the person living through them. Consider Amina, a young woman in Karachi, whose father had been diagnosed with a rare and aggressive illness that doctors said would take his life within weeks. The hospital bills were mounting, the family had exhausted every option, and Amina found herself standing outside her father's hospital room at 2 a.m, unable to sleep, unable to think clearly, feeling as though the ground beneath her had disappeared. She remembered something her grandmother had taught her, that the last third of the night is when Allah descends to the lowest heaven and asks who is calling upon him so that he may answer, and this is confirmed in an authentic hadith recorded in Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim. So she performed ablution in the hospital bathroom with trembling hands, prayed 2 units of prayer in an empty waiting room, and then she made a supplication that came from the deepest part of her broken heart, asking Allah for a miracle she knew she did not deserve but desperately needed. 3 days later, her father's condition began to stabilize in a way his doctors could not fully explain. Within 2 months, he was discharged, and the specialist who had once given him weeks to live told the family almost in disbelief that he had never seen a recovery like it. Amina does not credit medicine alone. She credits that night in the waiting room. This pattern repeats itself across the Muslim world in ways that should make every single person watching this video pause and reflect. In Lagos, there was a businessman named Tunde who had converted to Islam only 2 years earlier and whose company was on the verge of total collapse, drowning in debt that seemed impossible to escape. He had heard about the prayer of need, Salat al-Hajjah, a specific prayer taught by the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, for times of desperate necessity, and he began performing it every single night after the last obligatory prayer, sometimes crying so hard that his voice broke mid-sentence. He did not know where the solution would come from. He only knew that Allah had said in the Qur'an, in Surah Ghafir, to call upon him and he would respond. Within 4 months, an investment opportunity appeared that no one could have predicted. A distant business contact from a completely different industry approached him with a partnership that not only saved his company, but multiplied its value within a single year. Tunde tells this story now to every new Muslim he meets, not as a motivational anecdote, but as a testimony that he witnessed with his own eyes. Even in the smallest, most personal struggles, prayer has proven itself to be a weapon unlike anything else available to a human being. In Istanbul, a mother named Elif had a son who had fallen into severe drug addiction, disappearing for weeks at a time, stealing from the household, breaking his mother's heart in ways she could barely describe to her closest friends. She was told by everyone around her that he was a lost cause, that some children simply could not be saved. But Elif refused to accept this. Every single night, after the Isha prayer, she would sit on her prayer mat and recite the supplication of Prophet Yunus, peace be upon him, the same words he cried out from the belly of the whale, declaring that there was no God but Allah, that Allah was free of all imperfection, and that he, Yunus, had indeed been among the wrongdoers. This supplication is mentioned in the Qur'an, in Surah Al-Anbiya, and the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, taught that whoever calls upon Allah with these words in times of distress will find their affliction relieved, a teaching recorded in Sunan at-Tirmidhi. Elif prayed these words for nearly 2 years without seeing a single sign of change. Then, without warning, her son called her one evening, his voice trembling, asking her to take him to a rehabilitation center. Today he has been clean for over 3 years and leads the very same prayers his mother once whispered alone in the dark. If you are watching this and thinking that your own situation feels too far gone, that your prayers have gone unanswered for too long, understand something that the great scholar Ibn al-Qayyim, may Allah have mercy on him, explained in his work Al-Fawaid, that prayer is never wasted, because Allah either grants exactly what was asked, or he removes a harm equivalent to it, or he stores its reward for the person in the hereafter, something greater than anything this world could offer. Imam al-Ghazali, may Allah have mercy on him, wrote extensively in Ihya Ulum al-Din about how the delay in an answer is not a sign of Allah's absence, but often a sign of his wisdom, refining the servant's patience and drawing them closer through the very act of asking. Ibn Taymiyyah, may Allah have mercy on him, taught that the sincerity and humility present in a supplication matter more than its eloquence, meaning a broken heart whispering a few honest words can move mountains that 1,000 polished speeches cannot. This is why the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said in an authentic hadith recorded in Sunan at-Tirmidhi that supplication is the essence of worship itself, not a side action, not an afterthought, but the very core of what it means to have a relationship with the Creator of the heavens and the earth. Think now about Fatima, a widow living in Jakarta with 4 children and no stable income after her husband passed away suddenly from a heart attack. She had no family nearby, no savings, and rent was due in 11 days, with absolutely no way to pay it. Neighbors later described seeing her outside her small home late at night, sitting on a prayer mat under the open sky because her house had no electricity that week, raising her hands and asking Allah for nothing more than enough to feed her children and keep a roof over their heads. She did not ask for wealth. She did not ask for luxury. She asked for survival, and she trusted, the way Prophet Ibrahim, peace be upon him, trusted in the fire, that Allah would provide. On the 9th day, a distant relative she had not spoken to in over a decade contacted her out of nowhere, saying he had been thinking about her family and wanted to help cover her expenses for the next several months. When Fatima later reflected on this, she said it felt as though Allah had simply been waiting for her to ask, because the door had been there the entire time. She simply needed to knock on it with sincerity. This is the pattern that repeats across every single continent, every single culture, every single generation of Muslims since the time of Prophet Adam, peace be upon him. Prayer is not passive. It is not a formality performed out of tradition. It is described by scholars like Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, may Allah have mercy on him, as a direct line of communication between the powerless and the all-powerful, a line that never gets disconnected, never gets busy, and never fails to reach its destination. The believer in Dakar facing poverty, the believer in Birmingham facing loneliness, the believer in Kuala Lumpur facing illness, and the believer in Cairo facing injustice are all connected by this same tremendous power, a power available to absolutely anyone who is willing to raise their hands and truly mean what they say. If this video has moved you even slightly, if it has reminded you that your own prayers matter, that they are heard even when the silence feels unbearable, then consider sharing this video with someone who needs to hear it today, because the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, taught us that guiding even one person to a truth that benefits them continues to reward the one who shared it long after they are gone. A beautiful and ongoing charity called Sadaqah Jariyah that never stops giving even after this life ends. Before you leave, tell us in the comments about a time your own prayer was answered in a way that felt impossible to explain, because someone scrolling through these comments tonight might need exactly that story to hold on to hope for one more day.